there is a longer period of time between the rains. Has there been a difference here in Ecuador in the historic pattern separating the rainy season from the dry season? The farmers say there has been a big change. I was in Colombia a few days ago, and you know what happened in November in Colombia? They have 52 districts in that nation. 48 of them were underwater. And large areas are still underwater. And yet other areas of that country are experiencing drought. I was in Costa Rica this week, and they have had their typical bill. Their typical expenditure in a year for repairing roads and bridges is $100 million. This past year it was $400 million. Because the roads and bridges are built naturally to withstand the kinds of storms and floods that people have been used to for as long as they can remember. But the storms are bigger now. Think about what happened in Pakistan less than 1 year ago. It rained harder than it had ever rained. 20 million people rendered homeless in a nuclear-armed nation, destabilizing that nation. Many of them are still homeless. The president of Pakistan called me and asked me to pull together a group of scientists to advise him on how he could speak to his own people who were asking him questions about global warming. Think about what happened to Australia just 2 months ago. An area was flooded larger than Germany and France combined, the largest floods they have ever had, and their agricultural production was taken largely off of the market. There are many other similar examples. Let me tell you about one that is close to my home. I live, as I said before, in Nashville, Tennessee. I mentioned the Grand Ole Opry. The Grand Ole Opry was shut down for most of last year because at the beginning of May last year, we had what the scientists described as a once-in-a-thousand-year rainfall. No one had ever experienced anything like it. And thousands of my neighbors lost their homes and lost their businesses. The flood came within 2 blocks of my house. Those who lost their homes and businesses had no flood insurance because it had never flooded in those areas previously. These large downpours are new because the circumstances on our planet are new. They are new because we are putting all of this global warming pollution into the atmosphere. And it is trapping heat, and the warmer air is holding more water. This results in disruption for farmers. Many farmers don't know when to plant. Their harvests have been disrupted. The food import bills for some developing countries have gone up to unprecedented levels. But the droughts are also a significant part of this pattern. The same heat that warms the air and evaporates water from the ocean into the atmosphere also pulls the moisture out of the soil. And because the pattern of rainfall is different, and in many areas there are long dry spells, droughts have become deeper and more widespread. Remember what happened to Russia 6 months ago. The largest drought and the largest fires in the history of Russia. 56,000 people were killed. And then they took their wheat and other grain products off of the world markets. At the same time, the large producers of grain in Canada, in Saskatchewan, lost lost their crop because of unprecedented downpours. Argentina had both floods and drought. Brazil has had serious flooding. I was there in January, the end of January, soon after they lost 600 people. 10 days ago, they lost another 400 people. But as a result of these climate-related events in Russia, Argentina, Canada, and Australia, food prices have now gone to all-time record highs. You will remember that food prices were at extremely high levels in 2008, and they had the tortilla riots in Mexico City and in many places. And now the food prices are higher than that. What was the start of the Arab uprising in Tunisia? It was a food vendor. His prices had been raised. And of course he was then insulted by one of the security officers, but the initial stress came from these rising food prices. And in the poor countries of the world, this is already having a significant impact. China, particularly northern China, has had record droughts. And we are seeing a disruption of the relationship between supply and demand in food. Now, farmers always say that the cure for high food prices is high food prices, because farmers then plant more land and crops. But when the climate introduces uncertainty about when to plant, when to harvest, and when the traditional patterns are disrupted, this leads the agricultural experts to say to us, we are entering a new era. We have 7 billion almost now, headed to 9 billion people within 40 years, and many of the largest growing areas are under this stress.